Welcome to Module 301, Lesson 3, Modes of Exercise. I'm Emily.
And I'm Ayla, and we are your MyZone Master Trainers.
So let's review one more time the World Health Organization and American College of Sports Medicine guidelines for physical activity. For cardiorespiratory exercise, the guideline is at least 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise, think blue and green zone, or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity exercise, yellow and red zone, or some combination of those two.
Resistance training guidelines are also provided by the American College of Sports Medicine and the World Health Organization, and those are as such. You should be completing or encouraging your clients to complete 8 to 10 exercises that hit all major muscle groups of the body. So just a quick refresher. Some major muscle groups in the lower extremity are the glutes, the quads, the hamstrings, the calves, and then of course your AB and adductor muscles. Major muscles of your upper extremity are chest, shoulders, traps, lats, your erector spinae that run along your spinal column, rectus abdominis, your abdominal muscles, obliques, biceps, triceps, and the muscles in your forearms. You should be training each of those major muscle groups 2 times per week. And then the recommended rep range and set range is 8 to 10 repetitions for 2 to 3 sets. And of course, you'll want to take breaks in between depending on which muscular characteristic you're training.
For flexibility and balance, the guideline is to perform exercises for both of those at least 2 times per week. And in terms of flexibility, we want to take all of our major muscle groups and joints through a range of motion till a point where we feel tension, but definitely not pain. The recommendation for adults is to hold a static stretch for about 10 to 30 seconds for 2 to 4 sets, up to about a minute for each stretch. And for older adults, they might actually benefit from a slightly longer stretch of 30 to 60 seconds per stretch for 2 to 4 sets. Again, that's static stretching.
That's a nice review of the different modes of exercise. Let's talk about how we can use MyZone to measure intensity for each of those modes. We're going to focus today on cardiorespiratory fitness and muscular fitness or resistance training because those are the most appropriate for which to use the MyZone system. So let's talk about cardio first. You can use the MyZone system to perform steady-state cardiorespiratory training and monitor it. That would be more than 10 minutes of a sustained intensity. You can do that at a low intensity or you can do that at a high intensity. If you're performing steady-state at a higher intensity, we would refer to that as threshold training. That's a term you've heard us use. You can perform tempo or pace training. That's where you would move into bouts of yellow or red for about 3 to 5 minutes, followed by bouts of green or blue, a little recovery period for 2 to 3 minutes. And you'd repeat that for 3 to 5 times depending on your conditioning level or the conditioning level of your clients. Threshold training, as I mentioned, is high intensity steady state training. You're staying in yellow or red for 10 minutes or longer and it is hard. Yes. And then high intensity interval training, bouts of work and recovery. You'd go up into yellow or red and you'd hold that for maybe 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and then you'd come down, you'd recover as much as possible right after that for 30 seconds to 2 minutes, depending on your work to recovery ratio.
For resistance training, we know that heart rate isn't necessarily the best method of tracking exercise intensity. Repetition speed as well as load are typically better options for that. However, there are a few different types of resistance training that you might perform in which having heart rate feedback would be really valuable. For example, circuit training. This is focusing more on muscular endurance, still a component of muscular fitness. This is when you would have your client perform 8 to 10 exercises at various stations, working various muscle groups, and that way nothing is fatiguing out too much. You can have quick turnaround time and very little rest time. You would expect to see with that your heart rate stays fairly elevated, maybe in the blue, the green, or even the yellow zones.
Yeah.
And lastly, you might also see a sustained heart rate increase when performing supersets. That's when you're performing 2 exercises back to back, working alternate or maybe completely different muscle groups. And because you're taking little rest in between, you might see a bump up in heart rate. Thank you so much for joining us for Module 301, Lesson 3.